Cryptocurrencies are a crock. What social benefit do they provide?
Brad Sherman, Congressman in California, San Fernando Valley. This is an example. We are in trouble if this is the level of intelligence we are going to bring to the cryptocurrency revolution. Our leaders need a clue. This guy has spent, not only has he spent no time researching the topic, but he gets up and speaks with this smug attitude. He starts off with an answer to his question, cryptocurrencies are a crock, meaning useless. What social value do they offer? But he never gives a chance to the panel, distinguished panel, to answer his question, because he's here not to learn. He didn't spend any time studying beforehand, and he's not going to learn at the hearing either. He's here to throw stones. And if this is the attitude our government takes, and fortunately most people in government are not this clueless, but you know, this man with his lack of intelligence and sort of arrogance is dangerous.
Well, they allow a few dozen men in my district to sit in their pajamas on the couch all day and tell their wives they're going to be millionaires.
What a misogynist comment, and how untrue. I mean, maybe there's probably more men in the industry than women, but nevertheless, you know, I'd like to take a moment to point out many great women who are leaders in this industry. Elizabeth Stark of Lightning Labs.
And they can update the state. So they continue to exchange digital signatures, and maybe now Alice has $9 and Bob has 11.
Building a second layer on Bitcoin. She does not look like a husband bragging to his wife, to me. Joyce Kim, one of the founders of Stellar Networks. She's now doing something else. She spoke in front of the UN, and here actually she answers a little bit of Brad. Now, Brad Sherman, if you're watching this, make sure you turn it off because you might learn one social value.
Imagine what it's like if you're poor. This is a savings account. In Nicaragua and in many other countries in the world, if you don't have access to a bank account, you save in livestock.
Interesting. And then Joe Lang of IBM. I find her, she speaks well. Another.
I think there are two major things that I'm excited about. One, I think one of the most important things blockchain has done is it's forced this new era of collaboration and co-opetition, recognition that you can't do things.
Is she a husband bragging to his wife? I think not.
They help terrorists and criminals move money around the world. They help tax evaders. They help startup companies commit fraud, take the money, and 1% of the time, they actually create a useful business.
Okay, 3 points here. First of all, the idea that everybody in the industry is terrorists and criminals. There was a lot of crime, you know, around before 2014. You know, there was the Silk Road, and that's a very, you know, 4-year-ago story. The government did clamp down on it. I'm not saying there's no crime. You know what? Criminals use the English language. Should we ban it? Criminals use US dollars. Are we going to ban that? There will always be criminals. Very small percentage. And just maybe to make a small point, look at when you look, and I've gone to blockchain, cryptocurrency, meetup, events, conferences. I'm not meeting anyone who looks anything like a terrorist or a criminal. Looks like a bunch of nerds to me. Or the best and brightest used to go to Wall Street. Then they started going to Silicon Valley. Guess where they're going now? They're going to cryptocurrency. I got a couple videos here. Oh shoot, I just wanted to show like videos where you can see the audience. You know,
excellent, but
here's the audience. I mean, whoop, I was gonna make a joke and say
peer-to-peer trading of energy.
I don't know. I was gonna make a joke and say, well, that guy looks like a terrorist. But you know, you see women in the audience. Here's another event, Web3 Foundation, Decentralized Exchange Meetup. Is this about? These are all terrorists and criminals here? Not sure that's correct. Andreas Antonopoulos. Last time I checked, a computer science PhD. You know.
See, near about on we are the 11th March.
A bunch of criminals here. Wow, really? Brad Sherman, please look at. He's so happy about it.
but then again,
right, and then he had two other points. Oh boy, what were they? The idea that raising money, for no value is created. I don't know. Ethereum did an ICO. I think not only have the investors done well, but I think they are creating a platform which provides a ton of value. And Ether, the currency, fuels it. And what was the other little point here? Shoot, oh no.
Startup companies commit fraud, take the money, and 1% of the time they actually create a useful business. But then again, I dare say that some tiny percent of all larceny and crime helps finance something that turns out to be useful. It hurts the U.S. government in two ways. Our ability to have the dollar be the chief means of international finance is what has underpinned our ability to impose sanctions.
And let me talk about this for a second, because this is true. The dollar has dominance. Of course, 100% monopoly in the U.S. on currency. And around the world, the dominant form of currency that even those who don't use the dollar need to play well and abide by. And so the U.S. has an incredible amount of control regarding sanctions and many other things, which has value. Now, here's the thing, though. Brad may not realize this, but as a representative, you're supposed to be representing the people, not the government. And so, at least the better politicians will say, it is best for the American people if the United States government has a monopoly on money, because then we can do these things. He doesn't even waste his time with that. He's just like, it's better for the government if we have a monopoly. And there are some issues. Taxation will be more difficult, or I made another video about that. I mean, listen, there needs to be some changes in the way things are done, because we're going from analog to digital. We're going from a world with sort of at least in the US, one currency, too many. I made another video, Bitcoin disrupts gold. Bitcoin also disrupts the dollar, disrupts the existing financial system. Now, I'm not saying the dollar goes away or goes to zero, nor do I want it to. But the only way that we will make this transition smoothly, or as smooth as possible, is if leaders in the U.S. government handle it properly, and the key to that is knowledge. If Brad Sherman has any say in the transition from, fiat, analog, centrally controlled money to a new, more decentralized, open system with some competition, the U.S. dollar, I don't know, maybe it would go to zero if this guy was in charge. Doesn't have to be that way. But the only way it's going to happen is if people like him, listen, if he just spent a little, I'm sure he's not an idiot. He's been in Congress for a while. I'm sure he's not completely stupid. He's arrogant and he made a mistake. And I've seen a lot of smart people. Even, honestly, first time I looked at Bitcoin, I'm like, oh, what is this? I get it. First time you look at it, it could look silly. But I'll tell you what, if I was getting up in front of Congress at a hearing, I would have taken a minute to study what it is I'm doing here. Take some time. This is important, Mr. Sherman. I would like all of you to message this guy. Listen, I'm probably coming off too mean. Here's his Twitter. I don't know. I'll put the link in there. I don't want to be mean, but I think it's important that he is influenced to know what he's talking about. There are arguments, intelligent arguments towards some of the things he's getting at. But if you come at it with no knowledge, you just come off as a moron, right?
And stop tax cheating. And furthermore, when we have people take risks, we don't encourage gambling.
Well, let's not so quick. I mean, I remember in 2006, Barney Frank, you can look up the quote, he said, I want to roll the dice on housing with subprime loans to keep the housing bubble going. He rolled the dice. He wanted to gamble. They lost. Granted, it's easier to gamble when it's not with your own money, but the government does gamble with our money. Now, on the other hand, for me, I'm not gambling. I've done my analysis. I believe that holding Bitcoin is long-term safer than holding U.S. dollars or holding a U.S. Treasury bond. Now, I might be wrong, But if I am, it's not because I'm gambling, it's because I've miscalculated my analysis. I'm not gambling.
We encourage investment in the real economy. But when you buy a Bitcoin, are you financing a new factory?
Bitcoin is a currency, and there's many uses, maybe not totally for factories, but an example would be storage, S-T-O-R-J, creating a decentralized storage network. So instead of Amazon having all these servers and they charge you money, the system storage is building would take, if you have a laptop with unused hard drive space, you can rent out that hard drive space, and then people would store on your hard drive, totally secure. You can't see it, and nobody can. Much more secure than Amazon system. And then you would be paid in the currency of that system, storage. So in that situation, the currency of storage is being used to create a valuable business. Assuming it all works, could disrupt Amazon's AWS business. So, and there are so many, countless. Again, if Brad Sherman had spent an hour or two, plus, listen, he's in Congress, he must have researchers, he could get someone to show up and give him information. Not to mention, he's at the hearing where he's supposed to be learning, and he never gives these people, we'll get to that in a minute. I mean, if this doesn't go on forever here. Where he does speak to the panelists, but he interrupts. He's not listening. This is an example of how the politicians, we are going to be in trouble if this is what is out there as we start to try to handle the cryptocurrency revolution intelligently.
No, you're gambling on its value for no social benefit. Now, I know that these cryptocurrencies are popular. They're popular with guys who want to sit in their pajamas and tell.
Look at, he's doing the same. First of all, the joke wasn't funny the first time. He's not able to read his crowd, apparently. But even if it was funny, who uses the same joke twice in one show? Look at him. Oh, he's so proud of it. He must have thought of that joke himself.
Tell their wives are going to be millionaires. And they're popular with those who have read Atlas Shrugged and Fountainhead and believe that these are the new canons, the new device.
First of all, I read a little bit of both of those because they're famous. I read about 50 pages. Didn't like it. It's sort of about individuals' freedom and liberty and hard work or whatever it's about, which is sort of related to, maybe you could relate it more to the American Constitution. This revolution is about the power of decentralization. So I'm not sure how it relates, but then again, he doesn't know what this revolution is about, so how would he know what to relate it to?
Divinely inspired documents of our age. But they're harmful, and they're harmful in one other way, and that is, and I'm going to mispronounce the word, seigniorage is the benefit that the U.S. government gets by issuing currency. It is the float, it is.
Okay, I want to stop it because he makes further mistakes. Let's take one issue at a time. So seigniorage, I looked up the word. There's a lot of difference. It comes back. Originally, it was like when governments created coins out of metal. It was a bit of an expensive process to make sure the process of creating the coin was less than the value of the coin itself. And anyways, it talks about, the reality is there is value to a country creating its own currency. That value, more than anything, is the ability to print more and then and distribute it where you see necessary. Now, the positive view of that, if your interest is not just government power, but actually helping the people, the idea is it's the lender of last resort or the distributor of last resort. If everything goes to hell, no one has money, the government can print some and give it to important institutions. That's the positive argument. The negative argument is if the government screws up, they can print money, give it to themselves so they can maintain power. The bottom line is the key to inflation is that it is secret theft from those holding the currency. Because if they print more and they don't give any to you, like in 2007, secretly they're stealing some of your money. And that's why, they talk about inflation happens until wages start going up. You know why they stop when wages start going up? Because that means they're not stealing anymore, because now wages, that means the average person is getting the inflation. So they have to stop it. It's no longer theft. So but there's, there could be arguments if you put it in terms of it's better for the American people, for the government to have the control over the money supply. But let's just be real here. Competition is coming. Market share might not be able to be held at 100%. Or maybe if you're intelligent, talking about Cinerage, I mean, the U.S. government is $1. They could digitize it. They could use the Stellar network to make USD tokens and, and just make their existing system be digitized. Without decentralizing, and that could improve their Cinerage profitability. It's probably cheaper to run the network on Stellar than it is with the system they're using now. So I don't know.
Is the fact that we do not pay interest on newly created dollars.
I don't know why we would have to pay interest on newly created dollars, whether it was digital or not.
We lose that as well. And the Fed is able to return well over $50 billion to our Treasury in many of the recent years. We undercut that.
Actually, that has nothing to do. I think what he's referring to here is that the Federal Reserve, part of their printing was they printed and bought U.S. bonds from the federal government. When they buy a U.S. bond, the U.S. government then pays interest on those bonds, but the Federal Reserve does not keep that interest. They return it to the government. So the government basically doesn't have to pay interest on the bonds of the Federal Reserve. And then, so the Federal Reserve returns the interest, and then they call that profits for the government. So, I mean, whatever. If the Federal Reserve bought U.S. Treasury bonds with Bitcoin, they would still return the interest profit. So this has nothing to do with cryptocurrency.
And then finally, we've got these initial coin offerings deliberately naming themselves to lie to the public and convey the image that it's like an initial public offering.
Oh my God, look at him. He thinks he figured it out. Listen, initial public stock offerings have been around since the 1600s. They have been successful and popular because it's a good idea to spread out the ownership of large companies. It has not been successful because they used an acronym called IPO. And in fact, that's probably only in recent times that we've used this acronym. And let's remember the internet bubble, there were a lot of IPOs and they went to zero. Now, the other thing, and this is, there are issues. The reality is the cryptocurrency revolution brings with it issues to the country, to the economy, and especially to the government. And my point is simply, we need to address and come at them with knowledge, not with ignorance and bad humor. Maybe come at it with good humor. But so anyways, one of the issues is that, so the former path with the IPO is first, there's angel investors, and then it goes well, and then they get venture capital funding, and then private equity. And then they get with the banks to do the stock offering, and goes to friends and family and the banking partners. And then we get to buy it at the IPO. And sometimes this is after a company has been in business and is profitable. 10 years, who knows? Google was around for 7 years before we could have bought it. Still would have been great if we bought it then. But the ICOs, the initial coin offering, is at the sometimes before it's even launched. So it's more like angel investing, which is much riskier. And a lot of people sort of don't realize that. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of financial ignorance in the country. And to me, that's one of the biggest problems. And Brad Sherman is a perfect example of this. If ignorance is bliss, this smile tells a story.
They stole the intellectual property and trademark of legitimate investing and applied it to a fixed, fraudulent gambling scheme of no social benefit.
There have been many new cryptocurrency blockchain companies that have begun that will improve the world in big and important ways. That's all I'll say there.
Aside from that, I think it's a good idea. I yield back.
Aside from that, I think it's a good idea. Look at how funny I am. Maybe I bet he does stand up, open mic nights and works on his routine. And there's more. I mean, oh my God, it's already 20 minutes, but let's keep going here if I don't get too exhausted. This is painful and exhausting listening to this guy. I think it's right here.
Thank you. A currency is both a store of value, one you hope appreciates, and a medium of exchange.
Well, currency and a medium of exchange is something. It's something you use for spending and pricing. Store of value, I mean, because the U.S. dollar has been a currency and a medium of exchange, but it's not a good store of value. In the past 100 years, the U.S. dollar has lost 95% of its purchasing value. In the last 50 years, it's lost 50%. So the U.S. dollar has not been a store of value. Just clarifying that, Mr. Sherman.
So let's focus on the medium of exchange.
Which is funny because Bitcoin is not yet a currency. Kind of it is for buying other cryptocurrencies and some things. But Bitcoin mostly right now is a store of value. But he wants to talk about a currency.
Is there any reason why I would need a cryptocurrency to pay for my groceries or anything else? Why would I, that wouldn't be adequately served by using dollars? Yes, Mr. Van, yes.
Thank you, Congressman. No, not yourself, I believe, sir, because you and I are...
You're assuming I'm not a terrorist or a criminal, and I thank you for...
He interrupts to make this, again, with the bad joke. If he could just stop trying to be funny, wipe that smug grin off his face, and literally read for like 3 hours, he would be like 1,000 times less annoying. Or I should say, less dangerous. If he was just, some person is just like, listen, I bump into many people who don't know anything about cryptocurrency and whatever. But he's in Congress. He's at a hearing. This wasn't a surprise hearing either.
No, I'm assuming you're an American citizen, which I think is a pretty safe assumption.
That one's safe. The other two are...
By the way, Van Valkenburg started following him on Twitter. Smart guy. He had great, this whole video here. I'll put the link in. Pretty interesting. Some good things, but I like this Van Valkenburg. Pretty smart guy. He doesn't really get to make his point too easily here.
Question. Go ahead.
You and I have the benefit of a well-functioning and extremely important financial infrastructure that's around us every day, of credit cards, of bank accounts, and most Americans do find it not too difficult to become banked. We have an unbanked problem in this country, but it's not nearly as...
Unfortunately, Brad Sherman, listen, if you were going to get through to him, you'd have to friggin' nail it in 10 seconds and be super clear. I think I made the point a little bit with that Joyce Kim video of the picture of the pig. He might have sort of picked that up. But he just to make this video so it doesn't go on for too long, Van Valkenburg does his best to explain, but Brad is like, you're not answering it. Does anybody else want to answer? And so let's just skip ahead a teeny bit here.
Holding on to, and on every cell phone there's a way to use.
Oh, wait a second.
Does someone else have? Thank you. A currency is both a.
Oh no, this thing moves.
Store.
Do find it not too difficult to become banked. We have an unbanked problem in this country, but it's not nearly as profound as other parts of the world. In other parts of the world,
is there any part of the world where the unbanked couldn't just as easily have access to transactions in real currencies rather than cryptocurrencies?
So
by real currency, first of all, currency is just a thing of money, and it's been around for thousands of years. People have used different forms of money, whether it was shells or gold or commodities, and it was only in the recent several hundred years that people started using paper backed by commodities, and it's only since really 1972 that paper backed by nothing has existed. He is referring to this recent phenomena of paper money backed by nothing as real money. And now, I'm not against money backed by nothing because it's all about the scarcity. The reason people backed it by a commodity or gold or whatever it was was to create some form of scarcity, so you couldn't print paper haphazardly. We've allowed governments to do it because we're sort of assuming they're not that stupid. And, you know, to an extent, I mean, the U.S. government has used the printing, but not, you know, we haven't had rampant inflation. So anyways, but his claim that real currency is I think a little silly.
So there are parts of the world where real currencies in those countries are being basically debased by their governments or hyperinflated, or they just don't have actual purchasing power because
right. So you could use dollars, euros, Swiss francs. Why are those
so ignorant? So that example, Joyce in Nicaragua. So they want to have savings. So they're just going to use dollars. Where are they going to get the dollars? And a U.S. bank. And so if there's a country with a lot of corruption and a lot of financial shenanigans, there's not going to be a lot of U.S. banks that are going to operate there because they have their strict standards of not being around things where there's fraud, right? Who's going to own the bank? It's someone who may commit fraud. So people can't get the dollars in these places. Like, does he not know that? Does anybody not know that?
It's not the adequate substitute.
If you can find access to cash in your region of the world, U.S. dollars, that might be a very good means of exchange, but those will trade at extreme premiums. My only point is that cryptocurrency...
And when I was in Europe, I mean, if I didn't have the new dollar bill, well, there was a crease in it, they wouldn't accept it. A new, $100 bill, well, no, so not new. They wouldn't necessarily accept it. And you can't go, even in Europe, you can't just go spending dollars. Granted, yes, you can use euros there, so I guess that's fine. And a lot of places around the world will take dollars, but if you live there, and you don't, how do you get the dollars?
Currencies are accessible. They're accessible financial tools only on the basic precondition that someone has a smartphone and an internet connection. And I think there are regions of the world where people will sooner have smartphones and internet connections than they'll have access to valuable and secure financial services from companies.
I wonder if someone else can comment on that. I don't think in the tallest mountain of Tibet, there's somebody with a $100 bill that they're holding on to. And on every cell phone, there's a way to use dollars or euros.
On the top of Tibet, somebody has a $100 bill. Well, is there somebody at the hut who can make change for the $100 bill? I mean, I guess they would give change in whatever their local currency. Listen, that is, it just, the ignorance is profound. And again, on my phone, I probably could find a way to pay through my phone if I wanted to, but that's because I have relationships with U.S. banks, and I live in America. You can't just do that anywhere around the world. This guy, does he believe this? I mean, I think he does. I just think he hasn't thought through, and he's really happy with himself. He's, as I said, ignorance is bliss.
Does someone else have a comment?
They're both like, I don't want to talk to this guy.
Sherman, thank you for the questions. I want to divide your question into two different parts. One part relates to things like Bitcoin and other currencies, which is really what you're discussing. Second part is going to relate to tokens and similar types of things that have instruments that have specific purposes on specific platforms that people can earn and generate in ways that you could not do with cash.
What? I have limited time. Focus on what can't you do with cash?
Well, in a platform, for example.
Let me answer this for him because I'm not sure how long it's going to go on. For machine to machine, for immediate transactions, immediate settlement, like the example I gave about storage being paid, computer services, when you use banks, you have to go through a third party. In each bank, they all have their own separate systems, and the money just doesn't flow and settle in real time, and it's not possible. That's why we have digital. And let's look at it bigger picture. We, for the past, I don't know how many years, 50 or maybe less, 25, have been moving from analog to digital. All books used to be paper, now most are digital. TV used to go over whatever it did, and now most of it is digital. Everything has been when you used to do an architecture for a house, they would use the paper. Now I'm sure everybody does it on the computer with the CAD, whatever the heck it's called, program. Everything's going digital. Money is going digital. It's happening. It's coming. There's an advantage. If you don't realize there's an advantage to the digitization of things, like, wake up. You should just resign from Congress for lack of knowledge. What was I going to say? So it's moving that way. And the question is not whether or not money will or should be digitized. It is, and it will, and it should. The question is, how does the U.S. government handle this transition best? And as I said, the best way is with knowledge and possibly good humor, and not with Brad Sherman's approach with bad humor and lack of knowledge.
Where we have a buyer of property, sellers, and then we have third parties who are performing important services to the platform to help the platform run, to help validate services, to help do other functions that are.
And why couldn't these platforms use dollars?
Because there's nobody who's going to pay them. What happens on these platforms is that the platform itself.
Wait a minute.
Yeah, another point he's making is a lot of these systems begin before there is value. So those who buy in just get the tokens sort of for free. When they started Bitcoin, you just got a Bitcoin, right, for mining, which had no value, but people sort of believed in the system and that it would grow over time, and eventually it has value. But if you had to wait for someone to fund dollars into Bitcoin, it would never get started.
I have a bank. I pay them one way or another.
No. You have to find a source. You have to find somebody who would be in the business of paying them, and that costs money. So what you see in these platforms, what you see.
Sir, I've lived my whole life. I'm as old as almost anybody in the room.
Oh, sir, that's very kind of you to say.
Various intermediaries have handled my financial transactions my entire life, and none of them have gone hungry.
We're talking about a very different business model, right? Then that's one of the things that's so important about this, so important about this.
We know that this is a good method for terrorists, criminals, and tax evaders.
Again, he has to interrupt and not listen. And this, what was the name of the gentleman speaking? I don't remember. You know, he was trying to make the point about how this is a new platform, and it is, and it's hard to wrap your head around it. And even I have a little bit of my head wrapped. It's hard to explain. It's hard to communicate. It's so new. It's so exciting. It's so different. Mr. Sherman needs to open up his brain.
The question is there some great social purpose that cannot be met in any other way? I want to hear from a different witness, and I don't see one volunteering.
Honestly, I think it's an important question because you're getting ultimately to this question as to whether or not many of these cryptocurrencies, and I think the vast majority of the cryptocurrencies tied to ICOs, are really just means by which you're raising capital as opposed to currency. I will say,
well, raising capital but unregulated, doing
absolutely.
an IPO but calling it an ICO.
Well, one
of the other advantages, of course, of ICOs is it used to be if you had a great idea, you had to go to Silicon Valley. If you had money you wanted to invest in great ideas, you had to go to Silicon Valley. Now you can raise money and you can work on your idea from anywhere in the world, and this will spur and increase innovation. So I've gone on long enough about this. I will share the link to this video. You can watch more of Sherman. I should title this "Ignorance is Bliss." And I think this is his assistant, where it might be the opposite, which is, oh God, he's about to be done and I have to go back to working with him. And I think we should send message to Brad Sherman. I might add him to my tweet when I tweet the video. And I hope, I live in California, I hope he doesn't come after me. I'm not trying to be mean, and maybe I am, but at the same time, it's like in a sense, he's calling me a terrorist. He's calling me a gambler. He's calling me, just someone who wants to screw the country. And I'm not. And I also know that he doesn't know what he's talking about, and he's in Congress, and it's his responsibility to be, you know, if I was getting up in front of Congress, I would take my time to do a little research. I do more research for these videos than this guy did for speaking in front of Congress, and he does it with a big smile on his face. I don't like it. Wipe that smile off his face.